तेरे बिन
Right. So in the today's session, we are going to see how we can validate schema. So in the Postman sessions also, we have seen the same thing, how we can validate the schema of the response. Suppose when you send some request, or it can be get request or post request, whatever. So once you get a response and the response is designed or response is there according to the schema or not. So if you take an example, if you take a database table example, in the database table, let's say I have an employee table. In the employee table, we have multiple columns like employee ID, employee name, employee salary, and so on. So every field is having some data type. Let's say if I take employee ID, in employee ID, the data should be number type, or employee name, the data should be string type. So basically the data type of the field we are going to verify. Similarly here also, in the JSON or XML data in the response, the data is correctly giving or not, we have to validate. So that is basically called as the JSON or XML schema validation. And here we need to understand one thing, response validation is different and a schema validation is different. So what is the difference between response and schema validations? Response and schema. Most important thing. So response validations means what? We will validate the data in the response. Okay, the response validation, or in the response, if we want to do some validations, the validations or depends on the data, what we are getting in the response. And in the schema validation, we will focus on not the data exactly, the type of data. Okay, so what type of data we are getting. So that is a part of schema validation. So in the response validations, we more focus on data, what kind of data we are getting. And in the schema validation, we will check the type of data. Like suppose I got some student name or I got some employee name, whether it is number or not, whether it is string or not, that we are going to test. And who will decide that? The schema. So first what we have to do is, once we get a response, how we can test this? First, we will get the response. And from the response, we have to create a schema. We have to prepare the schema. And once we have a schema in our hand, then we can compare the response is according to the schema or not. Whatever response we capture from the request, and that response data or the response should be a schema type. Like how schema is defined, so accordingly the response should be there. Okay, so this is basically called schema validation. Even in the Postman also, we have seen the same thing. So let me first show you the Postman tool and how we have done earlier. And the same thing we will repeat in the Rust Assure. So go to Postman and we have one collection called schema validations and JSON schema validation. So this is a request earlier we have seen. So this is actually store API. And once you get this, once you send this request, we will get some response, and that response is according to the schema or not, we have to verify. So for that, what you have to do, first we have to capture the response, and by using that response, we have to create a schema, or we have to generate the schema by using some tools. And first we will specify the schema here. So variable schema equal to, this is all schema actually. So this is all still here. This is called schema, not a response data. This is called schema. So inside, once you specify the schema, then we have to compare the response is according to the schema or not. So first, then we will capture the response here. So JSON data. So now we need to compare our response is according to the schema or not. So for that, we use something called TINI validator. So tv4.validate JSON data according to the schema or not, we are validating. So this is a normal way of doing it. So let me just run my store API. Yeah, so go to my APIs, command prompt. JSON server store.json. Okay, so this will start at my store API. Now go back to the Postman once again, click on send. So now you can see this is a response you got. So in the response, so every field is having some data type, like a book is an array, author is an array, category is another array, price, author is a field, category is a field, price is a field. So in every field, there is some data type. So let's say author, he's a string, or price is a number, right? This data is according to schema or not. So that we are going to test here. So for that, what we have to do, by taking this response, we have to generate the JSON schema. So to generate the JSON schema, we have a different tools are available. We just go to Google and you can just look for JSON format or JSON to JSON schema. So here you can just copy your JSON and automatically it is capture your JSON schema. So this is your JSON schema. So now we need to compare this data according to our JSON schema. So once we created this JSON schema, so we have to just store that JSON schema in a variable like this, and then capture the response here and then compare it. So here the validation is got passed. So if it is a Postman, we will do like this. So now the same thing, how we can do in the REST assured through our automation. So there also we need this schema file, but we don't write the schema directly in your automation script. Instead of that, we will create a separate file, and in that file, we will have this schema definition. And once you get a response, we will validate the response is according to our schema or not. So now let us see in the Postman, or let's see in the REST assured how we can do it. JSON schema validation I'm talking about. So later I'll show you XML schema validation also. So first let us start with JSON schema validation. So day 6. So inside this, I'm going to create new class JSON schema validations. JSON schema validation. Okay, so inside this, let's create a test method void JSON schema validation, and let's make it as test annotation. Import this test annotation. Okay, so the first thing is we need to have a JSON schema file. Okay, so first we need to maintain. So where we have to maintain the JSON schema file. So we have to maintain JSON schema or XML schema, these files inside the resources. So we have some folder called SRC test resources, right? So here we have to keep that file. So once you generated your schema like this, we have to just copy the schema as it is and create a new file and keep that schema inside the particular file. So I already created some file here. Let me show you. Okay. Just minimize this because API is still running. Okay, so we need to have a resources file. You can just look at this. This is one. So JSON store JSON schema.json. So this is called a schema. So all the schema, we have to just copy that code and keep it in a file, and you can give any name to the file, no problem. So, but the extension of the file should be .json. So now this file, according to this particular schema, our response is there or not, our response is generated or not, we have to verify. So now we need to keep that particular file inside SRC test resources. Let me just copy this file from here and then keep it in SRC test resources. So we should not place this anywhere else. This should be part of SRC test resources. Okay, remember. So now we have a schema file ready. So now we have to capture the response, and the response, the data should be as per our schema or not, we have to check. So for that, I'm going to send one request here. Let me send .given. And in the, I don't have any given part. So here I'll directly write a when. So before that, let me import static Okay, so let me just import static packages. Okay. Okay, so let's say given, and in the when, so I'll say in the when I'll send a get request. I say get, and what is the API URL? So this is the URL I'm sending. Okay, so once you send this URL, so I will get some response. So I'll say then, and here we have to do the schema validation. So how we can check the response is as per our schema. So here we have to use something called a different assert type. So that's called assert that. Okay, so this is the one, assert that, and dot body, and here we have to pass two parameters. Okay, we have to pass two parameters. So what is the parameter? So first part is a second parameter is optional. So the first parameter is what? We have a special method is available to verify the schema. And that method is available in the JSON schema validator class. So that's a predefined class which is available. So the class name is what? JSON schema validator. JSON schema validator. So inside this, there is a method called matches JSON schema class, JSON schema in class path. So this is the method we have to take. JSON schema validator dot matches JSON schema in class path. So here we have to specify the name of the schema file. So in the resources, we have saved with some name, right? So that file name we have to specify. Store JSON schema dot JSON. So that we have to specify here. Store, and make sure you don't have any spelling mistakes. Schema dot JSON. Okay, schema dot JSON. Then semicolon. That's it. So after that, if you want to validate other things, you can just keep adding more validations like a status code, body, all these things, data you can still validate. And this statement, especially for schema validation. Okay, so most of the times we don't club these validations in one single method. If you want to do some other validations, it's better to write multiple test methods for every validation. Okay, so here I'm sending get request, and this is the statement which I have to write to verify the JSON schema validation. Assert dot body JSON schema validator dot matches JSON schema in class path. And this JSON schema validator comes from io_rest_module.jsv. Okay, so remember this package. This is additional package. By default, it is imported. Okay, so now let me save it, and then let's try to run this. Now this will go and validate the response according to the JSON schema. Okay, let me just run it. Okay, so now it is executed and is also passed. Okay, so when this will fail, suppose if response data is not according to our JSON schema, so then it will fail. So for example, let's go to JSON schema. Okay, if you just look at the response in the Postman, you can just look at here price. So what is the data type of the price here? I think this is a number, right? If I just look at the schema, the price value is a number. You can see here somewhere. So price is equal to number data type. In the schema, they have defined as a number, right? So what I will do is, let me just go to the schema, and currently the price is a number, right? So let's say I'm expecting string. Okay, I'm expecting string, for example. So now our response is in number format, but what I'm expecting here is string format. price format is string. So there is a mismatch. So definitely our test will fail. So now go back and run the test. Okay, now it is got failed. So you can just look at this, why it is got failed. It clearly saying there is an error. Okay, where is an error? Here it is an error. Expected is string, but the value is number. So, but found a number, expected is string. So there is a mismatch between the schema and the response data. So that's the reason it got failed. So this is basically called as schema validation. So whatever response we capture, that should be according to the schema or not, we are going to validate. So this should be number. So we can generate this schema, JSON schema, by using any tools. There are many tools are available like this. I will also keep that here. You can just use this tool. So this is for JSON to JSON schema converter.